Hi, welcome to DNX. This is Sylvia Christman, your host, and I am here with Dickie from Maderas Village and Maderas Culture. And we're here today to talk about finding places in the world to live that make you feel the most authentic. Hi, Dickie. Thank you so much for making the time.
How are you tonight?
Very well. So tell me a little bit about the Maderas Collective and how it all started and how you got to live here in the jungle of Nicaragua.
So we started with Maderas Village, which is the hotel side. Partner and I started this 7.5 years ago, almost 8 years ago now. And as we were nearing completion of the first build-up phase of Maderas Village, we realized that we need to put furniture in all the rooms. And we weren't overly delighted with, number one, the quality and the style of the local furniture. So we didn't really want to just go buy it at local stores. And we're also more concerned with the actual responsibility in terms of the harvesting process taken with a lot of the furniture that was being made. So we started talking with a few different design friends that we had in New York and different locations, and decided that it would make the most sense to start up a furniture company with the idea that we could get it going with a lot of the furniture that we were producing for Maderas Village. And then as the production of that finished off, then we'd have these other jobs coming in. So I've just slowly grown the collective side out over the last 6 years now, as we've been growing the village out over the last 8 years.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And in general, in terms of what brought me down to the jungle, what delivered me here was exactly what the theme of this podcast is about, that whole idea of seeking a place where you can find your inner voice and actually hear that inner voice. And so I was in commercial real estate in corporate for 3.5 years before coming down here, and loved it. It was great. It challenged me in the ways I needed to be challenged, and gave me the learnings I was looking for. But I just found myself in this state where I wasn't really bettering myself on a daily basis anymore. And I got into real estate to get into hotel development. And so when I hit that point where I felt diminishing returns in terms of my actual learnings and happiness starting to kick in, decided to take the jump and come down here. And it was interesting because the thing that I was really looking for the most was just this idea of being able to slow the thoughts in your mind down enough to that point that you can actually hear yourself talking. And this is something that always frustrated me when I was in Toronto working corporate and doing the 80-90 hour work weeks. Was I'd wake up on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning, and even if I had time to go sit in a cafe and write out some thoughts or write out some projects I wanted to be working on in the future, I could never really find that space. I could never find that time where I was really satisfied with it, or could really tap into what I felt inside. It was always just kind of shadows of the influences around me. And even when I get onto a track, I so easily get distracted. And that led me to feeling dissatisfied with something, but because on paper everything was fine and on paper it was all going quite well, I couldn't really identify what it was in my life that was missing. So I sit down and say, well, actually, the job's great. I'm doing a pretty good job. I'm working for great guys. I'm surrounded by interesting people. I've got great friends. I'm making good money. There's nothing here that's necessarily missing from my life. I was just unsatisfied. And in retrospect, looking back on it, a lot of that just came down to not having enough time in my life to have the chance to think about the things that actually make me who I am, and then be able to act on those things, be able to pull myself into alignment. And more than anything, despite that existence I was living being a very successful existence for a lot of people that would be alignment with, for me, I just wasn't aligned with it. It wasn't who I was. It wasn't what my purpose is in the world. It's not why I'm here. And so there was just this lingering feeling. And to me, that's actually the gut feeling. To me, that's when people talk about you have to listen to your gut more, make decisions from your heart or your gut. That's where feelings like that come from. That's where opinions like that come from. And they're often the most frustrating because they're not black and white. It's not clear as day in terms of the way you're supposed to go with them. You just know something's either on or something's off. And since coming here, I've felt on.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more what has changed since you came down here, started living here, and what has changed in your daily routines and the way that you live.
I mean, more than anything, I get to wake up and live completely on my own schedule, my own pace. And there's a lot of hype around the whole nomadic culture right now. And I think that's one of the strongest arguments for nomadic living is this whole idea of being able to live around a time schedule that optimizes your own creativity and your own productivity. And for me, that's been the biggest shift. I'm not a morning person, and I'm not like a mid-afternoon person. I appreciate cuts out a fair amount of the day, but I definitely find as soon as the sun sets, my mind just goes off. And between the hours of 11:30 and 3:30, that's when my mind really turns on. That's when I'm having my most creative thoughts. I'm able to explore my deepest ideas. And so from that perspective, just having the opportunity to put myself in that position unapologetically and not have to explain to somebody why I'm not sitting at my desk at 7:45 in the morning, or I leave for 40 minutes between 2 and 3 p.m. so to walk around and try to wake myself up. Or specifically in this life, I mean, I almost always take a quick afternoon nap for 15 to 20 minutes. And to not be able to do that, I definitely don't think that I or the partners around me could have done what we've done with Maderas Village and Maderas Collective, because just the ability to step into those worlds where you are able to think freely and where you are able to tap into that deeper level of self-knowledge and self-confidence, that's where you really find yourself. That's where you find that alignment. And within alignment, everything just becomes easier because you're not pushing up against anything. It's like you're swimming with the current.
Yeah. So as somebody who's staying here at Maderas Village right now, there's a couple of things that I noticed right away that make me as a nomad very comfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's, for example, that the kitchen is open most of the day and the breakfast and lunch times are rather fluid. So there's no set schedule for that, which I immediately recognize as something that makes me very comfortable, because I know that I go through various different stages of productivity. And in those times, I might want breakfast at noon, or I might want breakfast at like 3:00 in the afternoon, depending on what ideas I'm working on or what's happening. So kitchens that are very fluid with the choices that I have is something I really appreciate as a nomad, because I know that I could, have different desires for that, and set schedules that are very difficult for me to live with, because I've been nomadic for 17 years now, and I've never been able to really fit myself into the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, breakfast, lunch, and dinner system. It feels very counterintuitive to my productivity. And so when I arrive in places like this, I just get so excited to know that there's a very fluid food schedule, and just everything feels very much aligned with my way of living.
Yeah, I mean, appreciate that you noticed that right away, and that works. I to be honest, I've never understood why any restaurant doesn't do breakfast all day. It always drives me crazy, particularly hotels. It's one of my biggest pet peeves when I travel. And I'm checking in, and somebody says, "Oh yeah, breakfast is available until 9:30," and it might be like 11:30 at night when I'm checking in. I go, so should I just eat lunch? And does lunch then start at 9:30? And what about those in between hours? And also, from a kitchen setup perspective, I mean, having owned a kitchen here for the last 7.5 years, I just don't understand the difference between if you on your lunch menu have a Caesar salad next to a quinoa bowl, next to pasta, next to a hamburger. You can't tell me the difference between the preparation between a hamburger and a burrito, or a hamburger and a Caesar salad is different than the difference between a Caesar salad and an egg sandwich. It's not that much more complicated to keep breakfast on the menu all day. It drives me crazy. And also, more to the point, I just wouldn't ever want to be in an environment where people don't get to be exactly who they are whenever they want to be that way. And So if somebody wakes up and they don't want to eat breakfast, but they want to eat that a bit later in the day, of course that should be an option.
Yeah.
That's like hospitality 101. I never understand this very rigid approach towards it. And lunch, same thing. I mean, dinner, we keep it that 7:45 time because I like some sense of routine and schedule, and it also facilitates communal dinners coming together and allowing people to sit down for one meal a day where everybody shares those thoughts and everybody just checks out from whatever they're doing. There's no laptops at the table. We discourage the use of phones and everything else so that it just gives a bit of time for community every day. And I think that that's really important too. But the rest of the time, you should just be able to do exactly what you want when you want. And I think, and I do really believe that hospitality is moving in more of that direction. At least I certainly hope so, because when I travel, again, I certainly want breakfast past 9:30.
Yeah, and I think hospitality is moving more and more in the direction where co-working, co-living, eating, hospitality, it's all combined because they go so much together.
Right.
I can't work in a place where I can't hang out, nap, and eat at the same time. Because, when I really get into a project and I'm working on it, I might be, with my head down for 3-4 hours. And then I get hungry and I just want to go grab something to eat and not interrupt my flow.
Right.
And
you don't want to distract yourself.
No, and I want to nourish my body with whatever it wants at the time to feed whatever cycle I'm in.
Feed the genius.
You feed the genius. You have to feed the genius. Yeah. And I can't just go somewhere and just have like a soup and salad situation that's it doesn't work like that.
Completely. Yeah. No, I agree totally. So we tried to set up as much as possible about living that way here through all of our processes and systems. And it's definitely been an unnecessary challenge. Not unnecessary. It's been a larger challenge that a lot of places don't take on. And it definitely complicates systems and definitely makes things a little bit more confusing. But for me, that's the whole point. I mean, again, why create a space for people to go on vacation or people to go on work or people to go and be themselves without thinking about what those preconditions are for somebody actually feeling like themselves, somebody actually being able to tap into that deeper side to who they are and what they need in order to find that genius and move forward with it.
Yeah, I think my favorite places around the world have the fluidity around the eating schedule.
Right.
And that's probably why I spend the most time there.
Huge. It's a major impact.
Tell me about other things like moments, situations, circumstances that you deliberately create to sort of tap into that genius and create flow states in which you feel the most productive.
For myself or for people coming in?
Either.
So for people coming in, there's a few different things that we'll do and play around with. I mean, definitely like the facilitation of sports. So definitely the facilitation of yoga every morning where it's offered at 9 and people just are able to walk in. It's not that time that's too early in the morning. It's not late enough that it's disrupting your day. It's just that perfect 9 a.m. time. And having it 2 minutes away just keeps everything nice and easy. Surfing, same thing. It's just nice to be close to warm water surf where it's always offshore and it doesn't matter if you want to surf at sunset or sunrise, there's always waves. So those are big items on the more traditional side. On the less traditional side, there's a couple things where I don't talk about this too often, but we've discussed it as a group numerous times and have decided just to hold tight with this. So when people get picked up at the airport, it's a 2.5 hour drive between the airport and Maderas, as you're aware. And often people will get picked up in taxis, like 2-wheel drive taxis, and then our driver will switch over at his house to the truck because it saves on the gas that's being used and everything else. But what we've gone back and forth on is actually telling people about this stopover at the driver's house. Because for the typical person coming in, particularly at night in Nicaragua, to just suddenly randomly pull into this like dark neighborhood and have the driver turn around in a broken English tell you have to get out of the car is terrifying. You're like, what is even going on right now? Am I about to be rape murdered? Like what's happening? And of course, nothing actually happens. They move from there into the truck, and then they get in the truck and drive on. But there's always this sudden suspicion and like kind of edginess that gets created, which then is immediately relieved when they get up to the top of the hill here and they reach the oasis that is Maderas, and they get out of the truck and they realize they've arrived and feel at home right away. There's this sudden like sense of relief and excitement. But that sense of relief and excitement is actually heightened, in my opinion, because of that slight bit of controlled trauma that we introduce to people. Yeah. And that also has a lot to do just with people's expectations when they're coming to a place like Nicaragua, where everybody likes the idea of still having some sort of adventure or some sense of adventurous experience while they're here. And so if somebody arrives and there's none of that on the trip and they get in and it all feels a little bit too organized and a little bit too perfect, we find people will go out looking for that excitement and looking for that adventure. And that's when they can potentially get themselves into more dangerous situations, because it's something that they're seeking out that's not in an environment that we control. And we've been really lucky. We really haven't had many issues, but we are very particular and careful of our guests while they're here and want to make sure that they have the best experience ever. So something like that, where you can kind of play more with the psychology of somebody than with the actual danger that they're putting themselves in, is just so great from that perspective of, all right, like now I've arrived. I feel like I've had some adventure. I just like thought that I was in a sketchy situation. Now I realize I'm not. That desire for seeking out that adventure starts to dissipate. And there's not that same need for being like, okay, I need to go do something. Instead, people can sit back and say, oh, actually, I'm actually really content. Like, especially after last night's scare, I can go sit on a hammock for 45 minutes and just chill. I can read a fiction book over the next 2 or 3 hours. I can write in my journal while listening to music at the breakfast table for 2 hours and not have to constantly be concerned and obsessed with what I should otherwise be doing. It's that sense of allowing people to disconnect from the FOMO. And I'm not saying that necessarily delivers them there immediately, but anything that we can try to do as that hospitality experience to help people get there is a major focus of ours. It's something that we all take very seriously, because I mean, selfishly, given that we all live on site here and this is our home, it's just way more fun to be around people that are in touch with who they are. They're relaxed, their shoulders have dropped down, and they're here to explore their inner thoughts and their truer selves.
Yeah, I love that. So for yourself, when you venture out from here, what experiences do you create that feed your creativity?
I mean, given that it's paradise and given that the population in this immediate area is about 150 people, I love going to cities. I definitely come from a city background. I love that city pace. I like the conversations of a city. I love the fact that the best things that are being done for the most part in the world are always being done the best in cities. There's just this incredible collision of ideas and inspiring thoughts and feelings and emotions that just tend to brew up better in those locations. So for me, I like going to New York. I like going to LA. I like going to London. I like spending time sitting in those cafes. I like spending time in co-working areas. I like spending time just in any of those situations that will bring me in contact with like-minded people, ideally with contrasting ideas and with different opinions and with other perspectives outside of my own, so that we can have that collision of perspectives and find a place that's slightly more centered. And I don't know, every conversation I get into, every debate I get into, I always want to be challenged in some way that brings my overall worldview and set of opinions on life to a slightly more elevated, open perspective. And I think the more you can open yourself up to that, I think the more that you can acknowledge that all of your opinions aren't correct and that all of the worldviews that you've grown up with are just that, a set of worldviews that you grew up with, but that everybody had a different set of worldviews and approached new arguments and new conversations with that in mind, the personal growth that's in front of us all to absorb is almost insurmountable. It's overwhelming if it wasn't so fucking exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I always say that you can either find me in the jungle, where, in the jungle close to a beach, or you can find me in the urban jungle somewhere around the world having an interesting conversation with people that are very different from myself.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I always find that I thrive. That's to me is the most intriguing thing about traveling, that I want to go to different places around this world where I can find conversations with people that are different from myself.
Right.
And at the same time create experiences in which I can thrive and really come up with new ideas and inspirations for the work that I do. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, definitely.
Where's been the place that you found that's brought that out the most? Or is it a collection of places?
I have to say New York.
Yeah.
It's
the greatest city in the world.
It really is. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's my base, and it's my base for a reason, because that is the one city in this world where I feel the most at home.
Yeah.
And I thrive, and I feel at home, and I can get into a state of flow there very easily, where I just drift along. You walk outside your apartment and you can get into an adventure, just like you would walk outside in Nicaragua and get on an adventure by going down the street or dark alleys that you've never seen before.
Right,
but,
exactly.
There's that same sense to it. And I find it often very hard to explain why I'm either living completely off the grid in the jungle or in the urban jungle that's just full on. But there's something energetically that really, really resonates on both ends. Yeah.
I agree with that completely. It's funny that you mentioned the back alleys. I just got back from Lisbon, and my favorite thing about that city is the back alley culture that exists. Where just everywhere you walk around, it's all these little alleyways and these roads that go off nowhere, and these cafes that are just spilling out into these sidewalks. And it's just so incredible. I love that. But what's interesting about it is that I find walking through those back alleys and walking through them, I'm always driven by that sense of excitement over, oh my God, who could be standing around the corner here? But in a place like that where it's so safe, you kind of get this interesting balance to it where you're still inspired by the association in your head with back alleys, but never feeling intimidated enough that it would negatively impact the thoughts that are going through your head. That's one of those interesting balances that I think if you can strike, it's so great. It's like identifying all those different influences to what creates that space in a certain way for you.
Well, curiosity, right?
Right.
I was just in Morocco and then Lisbon over the summer, and I found myself one night wandering around in Marrakesh, and I was just wandering around by myself in the dark back alleys of Marrakesh.
How was that?
It's great.
Like
I mean, they're well
female.
lit. Yeah, I know. It's the things you shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
I do them all the time. I find that strangers are mostly kind.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't say you shouldn't be doing them. I'm just curious.
No, I mean, if you ask anybody what are the things that a woman traveling alone shouldn't be doing, walking dark alleys by themselves, and in those countries is probably number one on the list.
Right.
Or getting in the car with strangers.
Well, it's
and other
I've
things I do
always
very frequently.
wondered, because I love Marrakesh, I love Morocco, but I mean, even for myself, I just found it so aggressive when you're walking through some of those back alleys, and just like for me, it was more the just the constant haggling and constant bantering back and forth, where it's like, ah! So I was wondering if from that female perspective, if it ever gets almost intimidating, or if it's just irritating.
No, and I found that the further you venture into the back alleys that are very local, the less of that you'll get.
See, that's great.
And the more you were in touch with the locals,
right?
Where I did not feel threatened. No, I felt annoyed in the very public places where the hassle is really on the next level.
Right.
But
you just took a picture
the
of my
darker the alley, the darker the alley and the more local it seemed, the less of that was there. And I felt Often just, young kids would come and just, show me things or walk me through some other sides of town that I hadn't seen before, which was really sweet. Yeah.
Would you ever live in Marrakesh?
No, I would not.
Why?
It's a whole lifestyle that would, in the long run, feel a little restricting to someone like me.
Right.
Just the dress code itself, out of respect, is very it's counterintuitive to me. I spent most of my time in a bathing suit, so I just don't see that happening. And then the other day down the street and in the town in San Juan, when the electricity went out, I walked around. I couldn't find my way back in all of the dark alleys, and I didn't even think anything of it because it felt perfectly fine to me.
Right. Which I also find confidence goes such a long way in those scenarios where if you're confident, I don't know. To me, it's always the Costanza philosophy of like if you look kind of bothered and upset and focused, then nobody really fucks with you. I try to adopt that as much as possible when I'm in one of those back alleys or in one of those situations where I'd otherwise be a little bit scared. As long as you have purpose, as long as you are walking like you belong there, I feel like people just don't really want to go through the hassle of bothering you because I can only imagine somebody that's coming up as a mugger or something like that. That's got to be really intimidating too. And just the whole idea of oh my God, I'm about to go mug this person. Is this going to go well? Is this not going to go well? Am I just going to be embarrassed about it? Are they going to tell their people? You know what I mean? And so I feel like if they're still going to be doing some sort of analysis of all these different options that they have for people to rob, assuming that there is some robber standing there. And I don't know. I think that if I was in that situation, looking at 4 people and one person was kind of looking intimidated and lost versus another person that was just had some pace to their strut and looked pretty focused and looked as though they'd be irritated if their stride was stopped, no way would I mess with them. I'd definitely go for the ones that kind of look lost and intimidated and everything else.
That's what I think. I think there's a lot of other options around that look more lost than myself. So, in all these years, and it's been 17, 18 years now of wandering around the planet for me.
It's crazy.
Free and aimlessly most of the time. I can't say I've been in a lot of situations I shouldn't have been in. I can't say anything has ever happened to me.
It's great.
Yeah. None of those situations.
Right. Where for you feels the most at home? Where are those places that you felt the most connected to? And why?
Asia, Thailand. Yeah. Because I think the place that I love in Thailand the most and also other places in Asia and Bali usually have a collection of a lot of transition of interesting people constantly coming through. So there's always an influx of interesting conversations coming through, so nothing gets boring. With good Wi-Fi, usually, and fluidity and food choices that I can have my dinner for breakfast, my breakfast in the afternoon or in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I definitely have to say I fell in love with Nicaragua. So coming here has been...
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Coming back in January,
place.
right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Apparently, yes. Definitely come back because it has these elements that I look for. And it has to be a beach. It has to be the jungle. Yeah. So Thailand, I want to say Nicaragua at the moment, and New York. Those are the... front rows. Lisbon, I've been very enchanted by.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Yeah. There's something special happening
it's a runner
in
up
Lisbon
there.
right now.
Yeah.
It's that's an interesting spot for sure. I mean, definitely in terms of that larger conversation of finding those places that you just feel the most creative. There's something there right now that's it's not based on anything that's physical or tangible that's there. I mean, yes, the fairy tale architecture of the city is beautiful and inspiring. The back alley culture is super cool with the restaurants and bars spilling out onto the street. The language, the 300 plus days of sun a year, all that stuff is great. But there's something happening with the conversation there right now that makes it more interesting than anywhere, because
I agree.
There just seems to be all this excitement around the definition of this new global city that I genuinely believe Lisbon's going to become.
Yeah.
And
well, the next DNX conference will be in Lisbon next year.
I could see it. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It's
Right.
just that like new place where so many thoughts are coming out of, and just the welcoming vibe of it too. Like I just felt like every cafe I sat in or every co-working space I walked into, I was welcomed and people were excited that I was there, rather than almost feeling like I did in a lot of Europe, where it was like I was almost taking something from their culture by being there. And they felt like they were selling a piece of their culture to me or something, versus going, oh no, this is great. He's coming in. He's going to contribute to the conversation. We want this voice part of this larger conversation. Great. Come on in. That, in my opinion, is where the best ideas come from. That's where the best potential for societal shifting comes from. And I do really think, based on everything else that's happening in the rest of the world right now, that Lisbon Portugal in a whole has a huge potential for carrying a very important role and voice in that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree. Thank you so much, Dicky. This was incredible.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you taking the time. And, I hope I will see you in Portugal in September 2018.
Likewise.
Thank you. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening and your ongoing support. So before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. We here at DNX have a community of 11,000 members worldwide, and we'd love it if you joined us. You can find us at dnxcommunity.com. That's where you will get all the announcements about the DNX camps and ongoing events. Please come and join us there. You can also find out more about the English-speaking event in September in Lisbon, Portugal at dnxglobal.com. And before you go, if I can ask for one favor, please go to iTunes and look for Sylvia Christman or the DNX podcast and leave a rating. And if you have time, maybe 1 or 2 sentences for feedback. That would allow us to rank higher and bring more inspirational guests onto the show. Thank you so much for all your support. Have a wonderful day. Love and light.